Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Explicit Measures podcast with Tommy, Seth, and Mike. How's everybody doing today?
Happy Tuesday.
Here we are. It's Tuesday. Jumping back in.
Tuesday, another day of your neighborly, friendly podcast. Something I don't know.
Well, there's a number of conferences going on right now, so there's a lot of content being created and or published and or out there at this point. I believe SQL Bits is out there right now, so I'll give them a good shout out. Everyone, I'm seeing a lot of things across Twitter. People are very excited to go there. Their entrance, I don't know, there's a tweet this morning around the entrance to SQL Bits. It looks amazing. Like they have like Zelda on one side and Princess from Super Mario. What is the princess? Is that her name? I don't even know.
Yeah.
The princess from Super Mario Brothers.
No, her name's Zelda.
No.
The princess is Zelda. The guy, the character's Link.
Oh, Link. Yes, correct. Link.
That's what everyone forgets.
Oh man, yeah. True statement. So they got them on the front of the thing. They have like, it's really cool. It looks like kind of like 8-bit pixely kind of. It's pretty cool looking. So for those of us who have been traveling over there, I know that there's some Microsoft MVPs that have been moving over there to go to speak and or participate. Some Microsoft employees have been traveling over. So safe travels. Everyone stay safe while you travel over there and back. Enjoy the conference. That sounds like a lot of fun. And there's also a virtual one. Can you still sign up for it, Tommy? I don't even know.
I have no idea. So Rezarad's doing his annual Power BI Summit,
which was typically an on-premise event in New Zealand. I think it was originally. It was just like or maybe in Australia. I don't remember. Somewhere in that region over there, they had it there locally. The pandemic hit, and he said, "Let's go all virtual." And so he's made this amazing, huge. I mean, it's big.
Yeah.
They had 1,200 people watching the.
Wow.
He made an announcement. He had 1,200 people watching watching the intro or the opening keynote for the thing. So they had Kim Manis on there. I think was it Will Thompson also.
Yeah.
So we love those guys. They're amazing program managers. They're doing a great job on the product team, and so thoroughly love them. If you were able to attend Tommy's session, you got a little switcheroo, a surprise from Tommy.
So yeah, with all these sessions going on. So we basically you had a pre-record and then basically the speaker would join after. So I made a little boo-boo. I have quite the morning already. I'm waking up early to join the Q&A because this is 24/7. My Q&A was at 5:40 and at 5:30 I get an email from Reza going, "Hey, people are asking questions because your session named why people aren't using your reports and what you can do to fix it. Yet your video is talking about goals." So people have some questions. Can you join the Q&A?
Tommy, you cracked me up, dude.
And I'm like thinking to myself, I'm like, I know I had like a few files for videos, and I'm like, what? So, I thought, I'm like, okay, surely I did not mess this up because how dumb would
surely. There's no way I could have possibly uploaded the wrong video. No way.
Yeah.
I am very organized.
I spent a whole 2-3 hours recording the wrong damn video, surely. And then I checked my files, and when I sent him the right slides for the why your report, like the correct session. But I sent him the wrong video, and I also recorded that just in case, which I sent him about the goals and scorecard. So it was like, awesome.
So did you actually record the right video on why your reports are not being used? Is that you don't even have the recording for it?
I can't find it because I know I had it. I had a recording that I was going to use, but the only one in the folder and it says to me, like I have one that says like Power BI Summit 2022, and so you got to be careful with this virtual stuff sometimes. Granted, I guess this could have happened on in person. I just would have started talking.
And you would have to like quick switch last minute, like switch over to a different slide deck.
Oh, there was a bug on my computer. I guess the wrong slides are showing up. So, but yeah, so that was if Reza, if you are listening, which you probably aren't anymore because we're probably not even going to be talking about the right topic on these dang episodes. Sorry again. So
it happens.
That's what he said, which made me feel worse. So he shouldn't.
It's all right.
Oh,
they got some bonus content, right? They were showing up to get why the reports weren't used, and they got this amazing goals thing that's just so polished and so refined now.
Maybe your reports aren't being used because you're not using scorecards. I don't know.
I know.
Okay.
Maybe that's what it is.
So
Subliminal messaging. Awesome. Well, today's topic today's topic is kind of around our DAX hacks. What do we do with DAX that we anything that we do, tricks, tips, things around DAX that we do, or modify things in DAX to kind of make us either more efficient or we'll take us wherever it goes. This is going to be probably a bunch of rabbit trails, mainly from me, probably in that arena. But here's all about DAX hacks. Tommy, what was your what are your thoughts on some of DAX hacks there? I'll kick it over to you.
So I actually just sent and created the new Power BI or explicit measures Twitter community because now it's in another community.
Yep.
And again, I'm one to get frustrated when there's 1,800 platforms, but at the same time, we'll meet you where you're at, wherever you're at.
Sure.
But I posted on there saying, here's what we're talking about today. And basically not just like our hacks and our tricks, but a hack in DAX. One, I wonder if it's even possible to really do a hack, right? And then two, like you might have these tricks and kind of methods, but should you do it? And I think those are two things I want to talk about today. But when I think of a DAX hack, for me, it's about forgetting everything we've talked about on this podcast in an effort where you need to get the end result. And I think for me, the biggest kind of methods are where you're dealing with something and in your measure, when you're doing the best practice, your virtual table and your filter context, you just can't get, but you need to get the right number. There's a few things that I do that I kind of am proud of because it has worked, but it is not a best practice, nor would I ever teach this anywhere.
So we're going to teach it to you today on
So we're going
the
to teach it
Explicit
to you
Measure
today.
Podcast. Don't ever do what we say, but here's some tricks you can use.
Yes.
Amazing. Cool. I love it. I think these are good. These are, as you get more into the language. So I keep forgetting, and this is, probably maybe a bit more of an intro. I'm working with a lot of individuals. I teach classes. So periodically throughout the calendar year, I teach classes at UWM just around Power BI 101, introduction to stuff. And so a lot of times I'm interacting with people who have never seen Power BI or haven't spent a lot of time in Power BI quite often. I mean, a couple times a year, I'm continually like engaging with a new audience of people. And I'm refining how I talk about DAX. I'm trying to figure out what can I relate to that people understand. And there's definitely two lines of thought. I mean, DAX definitely makes sense for the SQL developer because you start talking about facts and dimensions, relationships, distinct records in a dimension table. That stuff kind of clicks, right? That kind of mentality is understood. But when you come from the Excel world, there's really no concept of facts and dimensions. There's really no concept of, like, I use VLOOKUP to get data from one table to another, but that's basically the extent of what I'm used to inside the Excel world. So a lot of those analogies of like a star schema, facts and dimensions, I really have to explain in depth, like, okay, this is why we're doing it this way. And when I also look at like where people are at in their journey, particularly around DAX, it's hard to explain, or it's a huge lift to think that measure can see all the data at once. And you start teaching filter context, it's way more involved than you think it is. Like, one of those options where, when you create a table, like, just say it's like by location, United States, Canada, whatever, just locations. And then you want to calculate where the sum of sales is only one country, and you just say that country name equals, and then you put the in quotes at the end there. And what it does is it repeats the same value all the way down the table, and you're like, what is it doing? And you have like this double filter context, right, where the table is applying a filter context, and then you're overriding that filter context with the measure, and so to explain it that way, people are like, oh my gosh, there's like so much going on here. And so when you start like, I was working on a project and had to like rethink this, like, okay, what are we removing? And I had an epiphany, a moment, like a light bulb that was like, well, the reason why you do dimension tables is there are some times when you want to remove the entire filter context of a whole dimension table. So instead of removing the filter context of a single column, you actually want to do all and remove an entire filter text of an entire table. So I was having like some really big aha moments these last couple of weeks around DAX and like how it works and when you apply filter context and when you remove it, how to get the right calculations. And you're really trying to build that measure to work in all scenarios for all dimensions if required. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but like, yeah,
No, it's true. But what happens with that is when you realize the power of the filter context and the power of like
Yeah.
looking through different tables,
Yep.
there's also sometimes where you don't know if that number is right because it's a complicated based on multiple relationships.
Disagree. You should always know if that number's right, even if it is complicated. If your DAX is
Not
so
necessarily right off the top.
well, you may write the DAX statement, I would say, and then you need to
Right.
come back and say, okay, is it correct? Right? You have to, but to me, it's more like the idea of like we were working on a table and we're removing the filter context of a single column in the dimension table. Let's say we have categories of like percent of total, right? You're
Mhm.
trying to calculate what is the percent of total. That's a complicated calculation because you need to know, okay, what is the row level detail, USA sales, but then you need to compare that or divide it by the total value for all countries. Well, you may have different dimensions, like in that countries or that locations table, right? So if you use one column, you're only removing the filter context of that one
Yeah.
column. But in reality, you actually need to remove context for all columns because whether I'm picking country, North America, what hemisphere it comes from, like whatever you want, right? It doesn't matter what you pick. That formula should always work for all dimensions across the entire report. And so when I started taking a step back and going, oh my gosh, I've been building my measures not all wrong, but this is another layer of stuff that I've never even thought about.
And I think that's where, again, like not that that's a simple scenario, but there's a lot of times too that I've found where you have to override a value based on a dimension column. Like the account, you have to check the account per record and then check what their level is. There's a certain price for that. Then you have to override it depending on certain situations. From there, and that's not on per record basis. And then you're trying to look at the aggregate. So you may not necessarily right off the bat know, okay, is that 1700, like what is that calculating step by step, especially for something that is maybe either you're dealing with multiple measures, a lot of dependencies,
Mm-hmm.
or you have a lot of variables, or it's not just one fact table where you're doing a sum and you're doing a filter context, like you're literally
Yes.
substituting the value.
Yeah.
And that's where you can second guess yourself.
Correct.
And not necessarily trust it. You can obviously try to export it and then go row by row and try to check it. But I think from a hack point of view, I know how taboo this is. I don't know if this is more taboo than pie charts, but I will absolutely we'll see.
We'll see. Maybe debatable here.
I will absolutely, depending on the need, like use a calculated column. They're there for a reason.
Don't ever use a calculated column.
I disagree.
Tommy, you're off the podcast. No more.
It's not as bad as substituting your own video, but it's still bad. But no, I mean, okay, why do they exist then? For the novice? No.
I think it's because you can do it. Honestly, it's like an iterator. I mean, but I have found there are very few cases. Well, again, let me say this: if you have control of the source system, don't need it. Should never need
Sure.
it. And to some degree, right? You have Power Query. You can always add a column there. Pretty much. I mean, there are potentially options like in Power Query that you would break query folding, and maybe that would be a reason why you'd want to put in a calculated column because you want to make sure the query folds for whatever reason, and adding whatever calculation you're going to at that columnar level is going to break query folding. But other than that, I mean, I never write calculated columns, and when I teach my classes now, I'm like, don't ever use them. Don't put them in. It just adds weight to the model and slows
I
down.
always use calculated columns.
Seth brings
every single time.
Seth brings in his little
in the report.
There he is. Coffee's kicking in.
I never create measures. I only do columns.
Well, so let's be cautious there, right? Like if you're working on a report that is extremely small, a small data set, like, and you're just whipping stuff together, use a calculated column, man. Like it's not gonna, dude. The effort, if it's a small like throw it together report, or like I think we get caught up in what we build a lot, which is enterprise level reports. We're sharing with tons. Where we have to care about the model. Like calculated columns in my book are a perfect DAX hack for really small reports that you're going to use on your own, that you just want to whip stuff together. Like, dude, don't. I would ardently disagree with you, Mike.
So would I would say
Depending
even
on
medium
certain situations.
I
would say
yeah,
like what's interesting
it's okay.
is a DAX hack
You
like
guys can be wrong.
a a bad a bad practice that you just keep doing because it's a time saver, or it's like something you learned first, but you know there's a better way, but you just haven't taken the time to learn it all yet.
Yep.
Like calculated columns.
Well, yeah.
No, I have learned about them. That's why I don't use them anymore. So I've matured past it.
Well,
Well, I
to
mean,
your point,
I would
yeah.
also argue this too, right? Is it hard? Is it yes? It's fairly quick to get a calculated column in there. I get it, but like, is it that much harder? Is it that much more time to go into Power Query and add your calculated column there?
Yeah.
No.
Like, I would say, like,
No.
not a big deal either.
If you're trying to, I've found more cases than not trying to do a merge, because especially if you're trying to grab from multiple tables, to try to do a merge on each of the tables that you need, it takes way more time on your model than one calculated column. I don't think they're inherently evil. I think they're morally, maybe they're
morally wrong.
They're morally wrong or okay.
they're the
Or you
morally
know,
they're not
some law.
It's
morally
ethically
good.
wrong to use calculated
Yes.
columns. We're getting really deep here.
But yeah. Welcome to your philosophy of DAX.
Well, if you
So
Alex Powers scared me off of them for like he did a presentation. I think it was at one of the user groups where he talked about never use calculated columns in depth or something like that. He just did a thing around it, and it was like interesting. And it was like really like he scared me off 100%. He was like, "Nope, I'm never using calculated columns after that presentation." Like he changed my mind about calculated columns. I think before that I would have been like, maybe. So that's just how I feel. It's okay. We can differ.
Listen, man, I'm with
sorry,
you
you're lucky
98%
my
of
daughter
the
just
time.
interrupted me. All right, so no, I get it. It's not the best practice, and you shouldn't use it in every situation. But I think there are needs, and I don't think one calculated column or a few calculated columns will not kill your report. Would it?
Depends on
Really?
how big it is.
Yeah,
Sure.
Your
Yeah, I mean,
partition setup.
Yeah, I would.
There's a lot of ifs, man.
There's a lot of
there's
ifs.
a lot of ifs.
I would say in the 2% of cases where you're just whipping something together and it's small and it's not going to get bigger,
Correct.
or like whatever, cheat, right?
Yeah.
Like
that is like
yes,
I
it's
would
easy and fast,
yes.
but the majority of the time,
If it's
there's
going to be a
just
certified
something
data
to
set,
avoid.
Well,
nope. Better not have any no calculated columns. Yep, Tommy, you're going to have to fix your
but you
models
can
now.
no. Okay, so man, we're gonna get way off. But you can create a column in Power Query, and that would still be considered a certified data set.
Oh yeah, totally. Because it's doing it differently. You lose the entire Vertipack engine of compacting the data.
I understand.
You don't get any data compression on that column. So every column you make that's a calculated. This is what Alex was telling me. Alex was saying like, look, you want to do everything in Power Query because the optimization or the compacting of those columns are only occurring after the Power Query has done its job. So every column you make, it has to store every row of data in its entirety without any compression. So you're making for every column you're adding a whole lot more and exponentially potentially more data or more volume to that model beyond just what you would normally do in Power Query. So for that reason, I was like, well, duh. Like then I'll take the extra minute or two. I'll go to Power Query. I'll add it there. I'll figure out how to make it work so that it adds in the columns that I need. And again, I'm probably a different animal here because I control the source systems on many of my data sets. Like I can go like. Tommy, to your point, right? Power Query may be too challenging to figure out how to join that column together. Well, fine. I'm going back up to SQL or whatever the source system is, and I'm saying, well, screw this. I'm going to adjust the view or materialize a data table that does exactly what I want. Right. So so for me, in again the models that I play with, I'm just like, well, I have control, therefore I just fix it, and then make sure that there is no calculated columns. Problem solved. I'm not worried about models getting bigger just because of calculated column pieces. Again, I don't think it will. It's not inherently wrong. It won't, I don't think by itself, it won't entirely kill your model, but it does have performance impacts that I'm like, I'm not comfortable with those. I would not do it.
I wonder if there is a threshold of number of rows or volume size where.
Oh, I would totally agree. Yeah.
Well, I wonder what that is.
Heck if I know. Like, I mean, I'm sure it's probably got, with everything that's DAX related, right? There's a lot of leeway for you to like mess around with things, right? I mean, this is one of the reasons why DAX is so amazing and Power Query is just incredible to me, is because you can do a lot of bad things and it just handles it, no problem. it just eats through the data. Like you can make a very poor model, and it still just runs fast. And so I think that's also one of the things that's a detriment to the tabular model is it is so good that it allows bad behavior to kind of initially start very early on, because you just don't know, like, hey, I'm writing this statement and I'm evaluating multiple things, like, for example, making variables in an if statement, right? One of my DAX hacks would be I may not make variables and return them in an if statement initially, right? I'll go through and I'll just write out, if is this, then that, and then I may calculate two things twice in a variable or in a DAX statement. I might just do it because it's faster to write that. I'll come back and fix that later on.
So instead of creating multiple variables, you'll just create the measures themselves, like the results, right?
The chat is killing me right now. You guys watching the chat?
I'm not going to respond to Chris.
I'm not going to respond to Chris Wagner. No. Chris Wagner, I will definitely 100%. That is a hilarious statement.
Stop drawing attention
And
move on.
Anyways, moving on.
So, okay, the last thing with the calculated column, would you consider that a hack or a bad practice?
I'd throw it in a hack. I'd throw it in a hack.
Okay.
Because it's just, you're using it, it's fast, it gets yourself done. You can look at what you need to look up, move on. I would say it's a hack because that would be not something I want to push into a production environment, nor would I want to try to push it into a certified data set if I'm doing one. So that's where.
So the real question I have is, Tommy, how many production reports are you going to go analyze today after this conversation?
I'm going to keep what I have, man. Please. I'm not going to let you sway me on this one. So.
Okay.
Oh, amazing.
It's not littered, but the earnings. So what about calculated tables? Does that fall in the same thing? Because I think that can also be considered a hack.
So a calculated table I think is also interesting.
It gets a little bit better compression, doesn't it?
See, I don't know. I had to. This is where I had to go back to Alex.
You'd have to dive into SQL BI.
Yeah.
They've got to have an article on this, like the breakdown of what's better or worse.
So I don't know. I don't know how that would compress. But again, my understanding is everything that goes through Power Query gets compressed. I don't think everything that's being created in DAX is compressed. I think the DAX engine does not do any kind of optimization and compression on those tables. However, I have definitely done an experiment where I was trying to do a bunch of tables summarized by different dimensions so I could get answers out. I ran my computer out of memory pretty quick. Like it was only like 4 or 5 tables of a lot of information, and I had a big machine, 64 gigs. It was quite large. It would not work. So I don't think the level of compression is there, and I think it definitely taxes the modeling engine a lot more when you have calculated tables. So let me say it this way. I think I have less aversion to doing calculated tables, like a date table. There's a limited amount of records you're going to have in a calculated date table. And I'm like, I'll take the sacrifice on performance there because it's easy to manipulate it and potentially around if I need to adjust that table later on in the service or whatever, it's easy to do. So that's where I would put a calculated table. Will I write a summarized statement to aggregate information into a table anymore? I probably wouldn't. I would probably call that a hack, right? I would do that short term to figure out if it works. If it works, then I'd go back to the source system, build that table the way I want it, and have that table then brought in as an import table. So long answer, yes, it's a hack. Our short answer for my long answer, I guess. That's where I would call it maybe.
I think the biggest use case I use for calculated tables is kind of like an audit where if you have a snowflake schema, so to speak, and you have multiple facts and you're trying to understand all the records that are available, it's a simple filter, distinct, union, distinct, and like basically kind of distinct everything in multiple tables, either to kind of create a relationship where you would have to append those in Power Query and you don't have access to the source, or you can actually just create one distinct column of all the records that you need and kind of relate everything that way. And just because we use that to basically see, again, part of it, the data quality to see,
I mean, does that need to be, so if you're doing data quality, again, I would maybe point that to, if you're doing that, maybe that's not in your main model. Maybe that's maybe that's like something else that you're hanging off the side of that you do something like that with. Interesting. Oh, Chris Wagner, way to back me up, Chris. Chris said he was able to shrink a 70 gigabyte model down to around 30 gigabytes ish by removing calculated columns, thus
Yeah.
saving 60,000 spend
Dude,
a year in
40
Azure spend.
gig. 40 gig.
40 gigs of
Tommy.
data. Oh,
I'm
Tommy.
sure. Yeah, I'm listening, Seth.
I'm sure those are data sets you've never seen before.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I'm sure that was just a related. So
awesome.
What about lookup value?
Ooh, lookup value. That's a good one.
That's a cheat, man.
I would look at that one. That would be one I would say is a DAX hack.
Again, I think it's a necessary evil sometimes.
A necessary evil.
A necessary evil.
Unnecessary evil?
A necessary evil.
I'm just teasing you.
Man, keep coming. What are your good practices, Tommy?
This is not about good practices. See episode 73. So
amazing.
And again, no, and I think all these, you guys are right. Like, obviously, if you were publishing something and you have, like, the larger the model, you have to figure out something else. But when you, especially when you're dealing with a new model or a new calculation and you're trying to verify and make sure things are right, you can either spend 15 hours or 5 hours trying to figure out the DAX measure and bang your head, or create that column in the meantime to get at least to get the number to see why it's computing that way, and then you can find out how to do that iteration in a measure. But there are the necessary evils, and there are the use cases for that temporary solution. Sometimes it is part of the model, and I think if you have to do it,
I think maybe the thing I'm struggling with here is, Tommy, where's your source of data? Where does it come from?
It's SQL.
Is it always? It's always a data warehouse.
Yeah.
Do you have? Do you have access to control it?
Depending on the organization, it can be very raw data where they're just tables, and the relationships, like it is not structured, where you don't have the logic kind of in tune, where it is kind of very raw of just records of rows, but you need to do a little more to that. So it's not necessarily this already modeled table.
That's what I'm saying. I think why the reason we're seeing these things kind of come up for your models is you don't have control of that source system. You don't have the ability to go in and make additional tables the way you need them to. You're kind of beholden to, like, this is what I'm given. I've got to work with what I have.
And a good amount of people. Yeah. So, and that's why they're hacks, because obviously Roach's maximum, right, which is always work closer to the source. Yep. And so obviously the best practice, if you can do this, have this in a SQL table already in a view, the column that you're trying to create, well, do that.
Yeah. I totally
and save yourself the time. But I don't think
everyone. The argument there, Tommy, though, is like, and I've seen this many different times, whether it's Power BI or a different tool, right? Is you'll have organizations or DBAs or the people who built the database and have the keys go, no, man, I'm not going to give you access.
Right. Yeah.
Even though they could give you
exactly read only access, it was probably just fine. Yes.
No, not just read only, but build your own views.
Yeah.
Here,
sure.
Here's your schema. Go build your stuff in here, right? Like, the argument against, like, them not giving you that access is, okay, then what you're going to force me to do is take business logic and put it in these files all over the place, all over here. And when people start asking, why is this, why is this data showing up this way? There's no singular view that you're letting me build where all that business logic could be.
Correct.
On top of the things, right?
Yes.
And it's just like, it's annoying.
No, and you're absolutely right. But I think I would love to poll people going, do you have that access? But I think a lot of people who are the pro, maybe it's split 50-50. So you're still dealing with 50% of creators who don't have that access and have to figure it out on their own in the later stages.
Yeah,
so
that's great.
Even if it is 50%. So
I want to throw another DAX hack in here. And I'm actually going to give credit to where credit's due on this one. This is from Greg Baldini. He did a really good write-up on Power BI tips, and I'll put that in the chat window, around DAX column or DAX data types. You can actually change the data type of what the DAX statement returns based on what you're doing. And let me give you a really simple example, right? If you have a divide function, right? You're doing divide, and then the divide function, if you put there's a third parameter in that divide function that is whatever you want. You could force it to be a 0. You could force it to be text if you wanted to. So if it divides something by 0, there's a protection value in there. And if you shove in a word, a text value, like no data or something like that, when you do that, the output of that DAX statement changes from a number to text. So like you can actually change the data type of a single measure as it's evaluating different statements. It could evaluate to a number and it could evaluate to text. I found this out the hard way because I was using that measure somewhere else and I was doing a comparison on it. I was doing some sort of compare, like above this number, below, and it said when it turned into text, it was giving me like, I can't render this. This is not going to work because it was actually rendering as text value versus a number value. So that's you maybe it's a hack, maybe it's not. I don't know how you'd want to leverage it inside an actual model, but like you can actually change the physical data type of a DAX statement or a measure based on what you output from it. So if you have an if statement, you could make it return a number, and then on the false statement, you could actually return a text value, which I thought is kind of interesting. I never really explored that too deeply, but Greg does a great job explaining what he ran into and how he solved it with his.
What are some of the use cases for that?
I'm just saying it's a hack. I'm not sure it's a use case at all, actually. I mean, the use case I was using it for was, hey, I have a KPI card and there's legit no data, right? There was nothing there. And so instead of having the card return blank, it literally just says blank because it's actually returning a blank value. There's no calculated values, right? We needed to just say something to be like, hey, look, dash dash, or resolve to something else other than that blank value, right? So you don't want it to show a non-existent word that says blank because you go to a page, you apply a filter, and boom,
Yeah.
you have 10 cards that have like blanks all over them. Like, okay, that's not really desirable from an output to the user, right? We want to pretty that up a bit.
So you can say a card saying the card basically says, "I got nothing for you, guy."
Yeah, I got nothing. And you would think that would be like an option on the card. I mean, that would be like well, for those of you who are actually like participating in ideas, right? That would be a great feature add to the KPI card. Like instead of saying, what is your default value when you have returned blank calculations, right? I shouldn't need to write a measure to do this. The card should just default to like, sorry, no data or whatever. Like it should have an alternative that's built into the visual. That would save me a lot of DAX writing. I'm going to write that as ideas right now.
So Joe actually says something that I think probably a pretty good hack that's also wouldn't be considered a well, based on some of the feed here on their visceral reactions to calculated columns, but creating a virtual relationship, like using treat as.
Oh,
or
yep.
Yeah.
I think that's very. I don't think it's a hack at all. I think that's actually a good practice.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of treat as. I don't use it as much as I should, but I think it's good. What do you think, Tyler?
My mind's ticking, right? Just wanting to argue this so much because. Okay. All right. I gotta say this.
Go ahead.
So if you're creating a virtual relationship in DAX, so it's not necessarily, it's not part of the model, right?
You use relationship or you're using treat as?
Let's say no, you're using treat as, right? Which is a virtual relationship. You're creating, filter context around that.
Yep.
And you're doing that in a DAX formula. Isn't that technically not necessarily the business model's logic? If you're creating this,
totally would be.
But okay,
right?
I think
wouldn't
is
it
be? Though? No, because I mean it's not part of. You're creating your own relationship, so to speak. If we're going to go down that route.
Well, I think this is where it gets, I think, maybe murky or grave in my book, right? Because there's always this interplay between like what do you want the visual to do and what do you have in the data model, right? You can't always like you're kind of playing this dance between like I need this visual to show the data this certain way, but it's only for that visual for this report. It's not going to be something I want to use globally, right? Globally, I'm like sum these columns, great. That makes sense, right? Sum and filter, right? Those are your basic functions you're going to put in the main data model. But when you start talking about like thin reports, the thin reports can have their own measures, and now you're really trying to additionally shape that data. And like the requirement comes in, like, hey, I really want this chart to look like this, and there's like business requirements around how that one chart should be showing. So that's where I'm kind of like, okay, we're not talking thin reports. It's now kind of a one-off calculation. I don't know if I really want to put that in my main model now because it's doing something different than, that's the business logic for that one report.
And I think, honestly, that's why I fail to see the difference between that and calculated column, except for the usage and the cost to your model.
I mean, that will probably be my main argument as to why I don't use calculated columns is those two arguments.
Okay.
Seth, thoughts?
Yes.
You are punchy today.
Oh man. Another one that I think it's not necessarily a hack, but kind of is creating your scripts in Tabular Editor. I cannot tell you, it feels like a hack, especially when you think of how people call hacks are basically just an easier way to do things, combining multiple things. And one of the best non-Power BI hacks that I've ever found out was to create your own dispenser. Is basically take a mason jar, take like a one of those like your salt like boxes of salt,
Yep.
cut the circle out, and you basically now have your own sugar dispenser. Anyways, that's what people call hacks.
Yeah, sure.
And
Life hacks.
But life hacks, right?
I just figured
which
out
is
life
not
hack.
necessarily a bad. Yeah. What?
I have a water bottle that I use. I drink a lot of water, and water is getting plain to me. So I just figured out a life hack. Take a lemon. Again, this probably is common knowledge. People know how to do this. But like, take a lemon, cut it in half, squeeze the lemon into the big water bottle, and now it's like this, premium hint water thing that I have made in my house, and it's like so much cheaper than going out and buying bottled flavored water and bottled sparkled water or stuff like that. But yeah, it's like a life hack. It's something like you just do this thing.
That is profound.
Minimal usage to your model too. So
so
much better.
That deserves like the tweet or the meme where it's like, I was today years old when I realized you could put a lemon in water. And it's fantastic.
Well, I've just been drinking water bottles full of water. I'm like, oh, this is getting boring. And now I throw a little lemon or a little lime in there, and it's great.
Water getting boring.
Yeah. I still have to go. So Joe's like, did Mike discover the tap yet? Yeah, I still go to the creek to go get water and then bring it out to my house. We boil it before we eat it. Oh boy.
But Tabular Editor scripts, like if you can learn how to do your own, which can be pretty simple for things you want to do. My favorite one is just a small one for selected value for a drill through page. Yep. So if I have multiple drill through pages, or I'm trying to create a kind of a subset, I can just choose the columns, all the columns that I need to create my like drill through button value, saying like click here, click here to drill through, and then details of this. And all I have to do is just choose the columns, right click, and all the measures are done, packed into a display folder.
Yep.
I can't tell you how much time that alone saves me.
I'm gonna jump on your thing here too. I think a good DAX hack, something that you should be using is you should be using Tabular Editor, even version 1 or version Tabular Editor 2. If you can, use Tabular Editor 3 because it gets better when you get to Tabular Editor 3. And then I'd also say with DAX quick templates, that's another good area where you can use pre-built DAX statements or build DAX statements, parameterize them, and then you can use them across models as well. So those would be two things. I had those on my list. Use Tabular Editor, write scripts. It's hard to write the scripts. We have a GitHub gallery of Tabular Editor scripts that Tommy and I and other people from the community have been curating. So there's actually a good number of them there that you can just go use. So it helps you learn how to write those scripts for you. I think, those are solid answers.
Yeah, I think that needs to be an episode or just a user group on its own about all the scripts that are available. So I definitely unfortunately learning C#. I've spent way too many hours figuring out something and going, I guess I could have saved a lot more time just never doing this and just writing it myself. But then I learned C# a little. So,
well, I mean, yes. But if you spent way too many hours learning it, this is where I also like automating. Man, automating is where it goes. I was listening to a YouTube video, and it was about an engineer. I think super fast Matt, I think is his name. He used to work for Tesla or something like that. But he was talking about like, well, you're welcome, world. Engineers are lazy, and I'm like, yeah, we are. They're like, we're here to make things easier for you. Like, we just make everyone lazy. And I'm like, that's exactly what I do, and that's kind of like my MO. But I thought, But to your point though, Tommy, if it's profitable for you to learn some C# so you can save hours of time with writing out. Like the amount of time you saved yourself, the accuracy you now have because you scripted it each time it's coming out the same way, that's huge. That's like a big win.
So your DAX hack is learn C#?
Kind of. Slightly.
I like.
Honestly, I didn't see that one coming.
Not see that one coming today.
No.
Did not see that one coming. That makes a lot of sense, though. I mean, if it like put your invest your time wisely, right? Like if you invest the time in learning those things that help you automate a lot of your work on a daily basis, that makes a lot of sense.
And part of that's
life
the data.
hack.
Well, part of that too is the data type. So another script I think I just added to the repo is you choose the model, and it'll iterate through every measure and every column and choose the data type. So all your measures will no longer be floating. It'll also make all your columns, like it'll remove the default summarization. So the aggregation will be none for any number column. But that's something I do anytime I save back to a model. I use this script that I created. So it like auto cleans. If it knows the measure was coming from a currency, it's like, okay, just make it without any decimals. Always add the comma to every single measure in my model, which is, and again, one of those things that just the amount of time that saves, and also improves that the formatting. So,
Mhm.
uh, question though for you guys: would you consider calculation groups a hack or best practice or somewhere in between?
Ooh, that's a good one. I don't feel like I fully have realized the value of calculation groups. I think there are definitely some very, maybe call it niche use
Mm-hmm.
cases where I think they're very powerful, right? If you want to have one measure where you want to change the formatting of that measure inside the context of a table, like dollars, quantities, something else, some other like format change, their percentages, right? Those kind of three things. I think it's really powerful because that expression allows you to change the format of each
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
calculation that's coming through there. I don't think I would consider it a hack. I think it's a bit more robust than that. Um, I think I'd go with, I wouldn't put it in the hack group. That would be my
Okay.
opinion. Seth, what do you think?
Words. I haven't used calculation groups in forever, man. Like, don't have an opinion.
Oh, really?
Oh, I
That's
can't have opinion all the time, Mike.
That's surprising to
Sometimes,
me.
well done, well done.
well done. Well done.
Touche, touche. Yeah. Where do you think, Tommy? Where do you think it fits? Calculation groups.
So I first I thought when they were coming out, when Marco Russo first had the article saying this is going to come out for Power BI next year, it's like one of those like as powerful as like when apps came out. But and I started using it for like the time intelligence, right? Because you're dealing
Yep.
with
Yes.
50 measures in the year to
Totally.
date, month to date. But it's they're just like I think with learning evaluation context in DAX, there is definitely a learning curve of what the heck is going on once you apply it. So again, I think you're right. It's not necessarily. I thought it would be like every single report would have
Yeah.
a calculation group. That
Totally
that was
agree.
my first thought. I'm like,
Yes.
yeah, this is changing every.
I can see how
Yeah,
I use this everywhere. And
right.
maybe I should be using it more, right? But again, like to your point
But it
though,
really does change your model,
it does.
right?
It does.
So,
And
like,
I'd also argue too, right? I mean, there's some really powerful things, but I'm very disappointed that I can't make a calculation group in desktop. So
mhm,
so where this thing feels hackish to me now is like calculation groups, and there's some people commenting in the chat like they love it too. So if you don't know how to do them, I would highly recommend you spend a little time learning how to do a calculation group because it potentially could save you a lot of measures,
mhm.
especially if you're doing like this month compared to last month, this month compared to the same month last year, like stuff like that when you're doing,
Lot of time stuff.
yeah, a lot
Yeah.
of time-based things. It seems to make things more efficient. However, I can't build it in desktop. So like to me,
Mhm.
like it automatically blocks like the general public from like being able to use these things. Now you've got to go into Tabular Editor, download that, make sure you can get it on your computer, and it just adds a little bit more friction that makes it feel more hackish in general. Because I'm literally
Mhm.
writing code at that point to figure out how it works, and
Right.
so I would like it to be a bit more out of the box. I think.
Yeah, and also the configuration is so vital. It's not, it's not just writing the measure with it, like the precedence, the
Yeah.
ordinance of it.
Yep.
You have to get that right, or you won't know what's wrong. Like I had an instance where I created like a one because it was basically like a data mart where someone could choose the measure and everything would update. But then I couldn't even add a normal measure to the report because it was always looking at a selected measure. So every other measure was just defaulting to like something in the calculation group. So it's definitely something that, and also the dependencies. So it's definitely something more robust that requires a little more developer thinking. I don't know if I'll call it a best practice because I don't know how much times it saves,
Hmm.
but I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if I'll call it a hack either because it's definitely like
It's more
I don't
robust
know.
than a
It's
hack.
not part of the model. It's like
Yeah.
the only way to edit is a tabular editor. So
Yes.
maybe it kind of is a hack. You
Well,
have to
and
use
that's where I'm
something
kind of
else.
going with. Like, it feels
Yeah.
hackish because I can't do it in desktop, so it feels like a hack. But reality, it's
Oh,
like
okay.
it
Yeah.
saves me some time. It can make things easier. So like, I like that. That's cool. Yeah. I
Yeah,
would
I'll put it in the hack territory.
I would probably put it more closer to. It feels like a hack, but I know it's a good practice. Kind of
Yeah.
use that thing. I would agree with that one. Any
So
other?
that the hack is because it's difficult.
No, the hack is because you can't do it in Power BI desktop. You wouldn't know it
Yeah. So
exists.
is every third-party tool a hack? Is your
Well, no,
tabular editor a hack?
you can't create a calculation group except in another tool. It has nothing to do with the tool.
What I'm trying to ask the question for is you're saying calculated or calculation groups are a hack because you have to use a third-party tool to integrate them.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say
So
I
is
would
every third-party tool a hack?
No, because
I would refine that statement because I would say it
Yeah.
feels like a hack because I have to go to a third party tool instead of like it's realistically it's not a hack, right?
Right.
You can do it. So like
Right.
yeah, but to me it just like it's like a feeling of like yeah, this feels hackish because I have to go to like this other tool to make it work, even
Right.
though the model supports it, but desktop doesn't. I'm like, well, why doesn't
Right.
desktop just support this? If we think this is so powerful, if Microsoft wants you to build calculation groups, why isn't it in desktop? Like, what?
Right.
That's what? So
Yeah.
that's
Why are we using desktop at all?
Right.
that's my hack. Throw out desktop and just use Tabular Editor 3 and just be happy. Yeah, totally agree with that one.
Are there any audit based things that you do that you consider hack-ish? Like if you're trying to validate your model, you're trying to validate the results, so to speak, is something that you're trying to do. Something a little more complicated or just something that obviously has to be right. Are there kind of little things that you do that obviously, like, I don't know, a calculated column that you would delete after, or just measures that you would create to kind of validate your numbers?
So that this may not be a hack, but I'll just throw it out there. I use Performance Analyzer quite often on measures and particularly tables of data. So one thing that I've been developing with companies, and Seth and I have worked on this a little bit as well, is as you build Power BI embedded applications, the model is key, right? And so we have this concept of the model can be used in Excel, the model can be used in Power BI, or for paginated reports. Well, the model does amazing stuff. And now with the new API that Microsoft has produced, you can send a DAX query to an API endpoint and get data out of the model directly through the normal APIs. So how do you produce that information, right? Maybe I want to use that information in somewhere else in my application for whatever reason. I don't know.
Right.
Well, you can do that. You can write your own tables of information to come from the model, but now that comes directly from the API, and you how do you write the table, right? How do I get the table out in the right format? Removing the total column, getting the right columns in the rows, percent of total calculation inside the table. If you turn those features on inside desktop and then analyze Performance Analyzer, you'll get the exact DAX statement code. And it writes, here's your filter context, here's all the things. And it really helps you formulate, okay, in order to maintain row level security for this model and resolve the data out of it, I can basically pre-set up everything I need and have it handle the data model the exact same way I would if I was using embedded in the service. So to me, that's a hack, right? I'd go into Performance Analyzer, build a visual, and export out the code, and then I can run that through DAX Studio and either tune performance or do other things. So I feel like that's a hack for me, something I use. That might be very specific to just embedding. I don't know if that's what you were asking about, Tommy, though.
No, I think you're right. I think because Performance Analyzer is DAX, like that's what it's returning, is returning a DAX query.
Yep, and you can copy the query out and put that in another tool to see what it's doing, how it's evaluating that statement, which I think is really kind of cool. Seeing how Microsoft automatically builds data queries.
Well, and you can even now pull that in Tableau Editor's DAX debugger. I don't know if you started using that yet, but that thing's powerful.
So that's what I wanted to get to. I wanted to actually have a note here for like using the DAX debugger from Tableau Editor. I haven't played with it enough to get a good feeling on it yet. Everything I'm seeing, people are like, "This is next level stuff."
Yeah.
What describe for me, Tommy? Like, what makes it next level? Like, imagine I have a I have a DAX equation that has maybe multiple variables or multiple What is
Right.
it doing that is making it so powerful than what you've been traditionally doing?
So first is it's pulling in. So let's say you created a pivot grid or you did your own
Okay.
DAX query
Sure.
in Power BI or in Tableau Editor, and you're like, why is that number showing 15 for that context?
Okay.
You can right click on that, or again create your own DAX query
Hmm.
and say debug this value, not necessarily the query, but why that 15 in that record in that column.
Okay.
And then what it's going to do is return the DAX query like basically what Performance Analyzer would do. And you can go
Oh.
iterate row by row, and just like in like Visual Studio Code, add watch value. So I want to say
What?
at
Okay.
this at this
I get it now.
at this row, yeah. So basically, you can say, okay, when it's doing the filter, show me, like, or when it's doing the
It's
selected
actually like
value here.
it's an actual code debugger. You
Yeah,
can go
it's like a
line by
code
line.
debugger, right? Yeah, and then you
Oh.
can add your own variables to it at certain points. You can say, hey, at this point, it's saying it's selecting a value, like one value. What value is that? And it will show you as you can continue and go through, double click and show the like dependency of it. But again, the thing that I think they just released a few days ago, but they're going to be adding more, is your ability to add watch values. So if you
Nice.
want to add your own DAX statement within it to say, what would this return in this situation
Sure.
at this part of the DAX query?
Hmm.
So, I mean, is it a hack? It's available, but it's obviously only available in Tableau Editor. So
True. Again, we've now put ourselves squarely in the hack space because it's not a standard Microsoft desktop tool. But yeah,
yeah, no, but I think to kind of validate your numbers,
yes.
and to, especially not just the end result, but halfway through it, going, why is it returning 3? I should only be returning one value here.
I think
That
this is a
yeah.
part where like understanding filter context is key, and
Oh
unless you
gosh.
understand it, right, the DAX debugger gives you like that deeper knowledge of like,
Mhm.
oh, now I understand. And so for me, I get so bent out of shape around if I can't understand it, I don't feel like I know it. Like
Right.
so having the opportunity to go in with like a deeper tool, like so step by step, line by line, I can
Mhm.
now understand why the filter context is changing. What is it calculating as it
Yeah.
goes along? That goes a long way for me to help my understanding, and then I feel like I can learn something.
Yeah. And I think it is a game changer, and I think they're
Hmm.
still at the cuffs of the UI and what you'll be able to do with it.
That's
But
cool. I like
yeah,
that one. That's a good hack.
it's phenomenal.
We're I feel like we're landing on things that are like these are good hacks and these are bad hacks. Because some of these things are interesting, like they're good things to do, right?
Yeah.
Use external tools, and this is not a DAX hack. Maybe it is, but like Steve Campbell came up with a tool that lets you split the PBX file, right? So people were asking. There's been a couple of conversations around like, how do I take a data model? And so I've built a report. I have a data model in it. Oh shoot, I want to now use the model and thin report methodology. How do I do that? And so Steve Campbell wrote a tool. It's a PowerShell script that comes from Business Ops. And when you use that, you're able to then point to a single PBIX file that has a model and thin report combined. So it's a single file. You point at the report, it will then take a copy of the report. It will delete out the report sections on one of them, making it just the model, and it will retain all of the visuals on the other side of it, making it just a thin report. So it basically takes a model and splits it in half. It's technically not a DAX hack, but I think it's a really good hack around, yeah, it's probably not supported by Microsoft, but I can't tell you the number of times I've gone into companies where they just built a report on top of a data model, and I'm like, well, how are we going to version this? Like, how do we, like, I don't want to continue, every time you make a change to the thin report, like if we're using incremental refresh, every time you change report elements, you have to republish the file and it has to reload all its partitions. It's very wasteful to do that if I'm just making changes to the thin report. Not helpful. So like you really want to start thinking about separating those things into two elements. So that's another one I would throw out there.
I would definitely call that a hack, not necessarily DAX. I love that. That's fine, but calculated columns, which is supported by Microsoft, just to go back on that, is terrible. It's interesting. That's all I'm saying. So
Interesting. What's your link there, Seth?
The playlist.
Oh, gotcha. For the YouTube channel. Gotcha. Okay.
this
So I would say going back to that one, I mean, I would maybe slightly disagree with you, Tommy, around like that's not a DAX hack because you're literally moving all of the DAX and the entire model to its own PBIX model. So it's
That's
not.
you wouldn't call it a hack?
Oh, I totally would call it a hack.
Oh yeah, I call it a hack too.
Oh, okay, got it. Good.
Oh no, yeah.
You said you wouldn't call it a DAX hack because it's technically not in
Well,
DAX writing DAX statements. But I'm arguing like you're touching the entire model, which is
no,
all
that's
DAX
a
anyways.
full hack. Yeah, it's every hack kind of thing.
It is the embodiment
It's
of
the
all
umbrella
hacks
hack.
rolled together into one
Yeah.
big one. Amazing. Cool. Well, I think we've done it again. We've burned a good, almost a whole hour of your time today. You guys have any final thoughts? Any roll-ups here around? We'll kind of go through final thoughts for all these DAX hacks, whether good or bad. Tommy, let's start with you.
I think whatever hack you have, it's good to evaluate again. Is it technical debt? Is it something that improves your workflow? Just because it's something that gives you the end result or helps save you time in the long term. It's looking at your technical debt, and it's also looking at, again, are you using your best practices? That being said, understand situations, understand if you need to find out what your results are or you're correct, like whatever you're trying to do, make sure you can say if you can do it in a better way. But that, yeah,
I like that one. One thing I totally forgot to mention.
I don't even know what I just said, so yeah.
That's okay.
That got confusing.
I confused myself on that statement. One thing I forgot to mention, which I know it's kind of a hack, but PBI tools is really awesome.
I need to use that more.
Really cool. It's literally taking the entirety of a Power BI file and ripping it apart and pulling the same way you would do a BIM file and pulling the BIM file. It does everything for the entirety of the report and tracking all the elements of the report. So that's another one. Yes, it's not quite DAX hacky, but man, that is a powerful tool, and I'm getting really into that one right now. It's really pretty sweet. So my final wrap up would be keep learning in the community, because I think things you do today are not always, you don't know they're a hack until you start working with other experts to know what you were like. I didn't know any different until I started working with Alex Powers about calculated columns and how bad it was to my model. I just knew they were like there, right? I didn't know. So I think for me, like, to know what is good practice, what is not good practice really comes from experience. And so integrating with other people, either in a Power BI community group, engaging with a community in your area or online, or I think that's very helpful, because you can be around other people who've done experimenting and researching around certain things, and then you can kind of learn, as a herd, we kind of all figure out the direct, like, what's a good path to go down, right? Anything's possible. You can build it however you want, but how do you know if it's good practice or not? You only know that when, oh shoot, I've added 30 like to Chris's example, right? I had a number of calculated columns and it was expensive and the model grew in size. Great. Now we know that. That's a data point that we can log away for future and be like, well, maybe I shouldn't use them as much as I was. I'll try and mitigate the use of calculated columns, kind of things, right? So I think those are kind of things where you don't know what you don't know until someone or you spend the time figuring out how to do it. So get involved with the community, learn what they're learning, ask questions, and I think that'll, again, rises everyone's knowledge up a little bit. Seth, any key takeaways for you?
In with the good hacks, out with the bad, man.
Yep.
Right? Like I agree with you. The only way you're gonna understand whether or not something's a hack is if you can, just kind of continue to learn, keep staying curious, and try to make your reporting better, and then you stop using calculated columns.
I like Donald's comment here as he wraps up here. He goes, "Focus on business value, not technical purity." I think that's a good statement.
I agree with that. Right?
Yeah,
I agree.
Good guiding principle.
It's the bad hacks that will ultimately impact the business value, though, right? That you need to avoid.
Yep.
Yeah.
Or you'll add too much tech debt and have to figure it out later, kind of thing.
Right.
Awesome. Well, with that, thank you guys very much. We appreciate it. Thank you for everyone who's listening. We appreciate your comments in the YouTube chat. So thank you very much for participating. We really appreciate your feedback, and a lot of your comments make us laugh. It's totally enjoyable. We love the community. You guys are awesome. We'll see you guys again. Oh, I forgot. I'm doing a full wrap up here. Thanks for watching. Our only ask here is to share the podcast. If you liked it, if you got a laugh out of it, please share it with somebody else on your social medias or in your company. We'd really appreciate that. Tommy, where else can you find the podcast?
So if you're listening right now, make sure to subscribe on YouTube and LinkedIn to Power BI Tips. We do it live every Tuesday and Thursday, 7:30 a.m. Central. So if you're wondering who the heck is talking, it's a live chat. So join the conversation. If you want to listen to our previous episodes, subscribe on Apple and Spotify and help us out. Leave us a 5-star rating if you think you deserve it. Leave us a rating. It really helps us out. Subscribe. We have 89 episodes, 88, whatever, somewhere around 88 to 89 episodes at this point.
Inside joke.
So yeah. Yeah, a lot of stuff that we've been able to talk about. Enjoy it. Thanks so much.
Thank you all very much. We'll see you on Thursday.